Did you know that Exorcist 3 was Jeffrey Dahmer's favorite movie? And it stars Grima Wormtongue as the Gemini Killer. This is obviously the Zodiac, or like a bunch of, so-called serial killer events, which there's good evidence to suggest that this is not really what we've been told, this whole Zodiac nonsense. If you read, Dave McGowan's account of it, there was like a Roman Polanski was going to do this big documentary on the Zodiac, and it's almost like the persona of the Zodiac was patched together of different killings, and is very Hollywood. And if you've read Programmed to Kill, Dave's book, then you know that sometimes they'll just haystack the murders onto one dude and say, oh, this guy killed 200 people, and he's like a, mentally challenged person who can hardly do anything, who actually did kill one guy maybe. And they'll say, oh, he was a serial killer. And really they're maybe stacking a bunch of unsolved crimes on that guy. Patton's in it. Patton plays the unbelieving atheist Jewish detective who is buddies with the same priest in Exorcist 1, Father Dyer. Father Dyer. And did you notice I just tweeted the article? Did you see that? Father Dyer from The Exorcist in real life is some Jesuit named O'Malley, is accused of being a creeper on a boy when he was young. Now, we have to be clear here so we don't get the Hollywood reality and the media reality, which are often overlapping, confused. But so this guy in the first Exorcist plays a character named Dyer. His real name's not Dyer. So hopefully us Dyers don't end up being a bunch of creepers. Even though I've got I have a creeper mustache right now, right? I think it's the same Father Dyer in Exorcist 3 that George C. Scott is opposing. Now, there's a weird dream with Fabio and midgets and cops. I'm not joking. Fabio, the actual Fabio, shows up in his dream with midgets and cops. I mean, how are these Exorcist movies so weird, dude? They're like acid trips. Maybe they're all tripping acid. Now, if we remember, there was an MKULTRA Jesuit connection. Did you know that the spearhead of the CIA Jesuit Connect, John Courtney Maury, he was doing acid? So there is this Jesuit Luciferian connection. By the way, Malachi Martin even admits this. And did you know, in Exorcist 1, it's Malachi Martin that it's loosely based on. I figured it was. And then I dug up some articles that actually discussed that. And by the way, yes, Malachi Martin was very closely working with the CIA. There's a military CIA killer element to this because the Jesuit in this was involved in Green Beret operations, Douglas Valentine, Phoenix Program stuff. So Phoenix Program comes up. Suddenly the Jesuits are all over this, which is interesting because the Jesuits were all over part 1 in terms of actual Jesuit actors being in the movie. So I came across this in Sinister Forces many years ago, about 10 years ago, and this kind of blew me away about Jeffrey Dahmer's obsession with Exorcist 3. But my completest blood couldn't let that stop me. Dude, this guy's weird. Maybe I shouldn't cite this guy. The basic story of The Exorcist 3 follows Kinderman, the cop, played by George C. Scott, who's investigating a series of murders that seem to meet the MO of the Gemini Killer. He doesn't even mention that it's the Zodiac Killer. He was put to death in the electric chair 15 years prior. Is it a copycat killing? Well, it would seem the details of these killings had been substituted with fake ones in order to weed out people who were pretending to be the killer. Okay, Kinderman soon finds out that the man who fits the description is Father Damien Karras, previously thought to have been in solitary confinement, the disturbed ward of the hospital. However, the man doesn't claim to be the Father Karras. He claims to be Gemini. The movie is Jeffrey Dahmer's favorite movie. One of those facts includes his admiration of Brad Dourif's portrayal of the Gemini Killer. The Gemini Killer's hobby is keeping parts of the victims after he killed them, and this stuck with Dahmer. Dahmer was also a big fan of the Emperor in Star Wars, so he has this sort of narcissist type thing. Dahmer also had an altar that he would rock. He would watch Exorcist 3 and he would rock back and forth, and he had an occult altar. But people don't talk about that, so I wonder why. Well, that's because they don't really want to talk about those kinds of crimes. The demon possesses the serial killer, and then the cop is the one who figures it out and tracks it down. The priests never do, which is interesting. They either get possessed, which maybe that's more plausible. Maybe that's closer to reality. I mean, the Vatican itself needs to be exorcised. Can we get an exorcist to go and exorcise the demons out of the Vatican? So maybe the movies are more realistic here. But George C. Scott, as the atheist Jewish investigator, says, "Why would God invent death? Why would God invent death? Why would there be death? Oh, the death." Right. So the problem of evil argument, which is, I guess, conceived to be the ultimate anti-theist argument, and this makes him a skeptic, but he's good buddies with Father Dyer. The dream that he has is really interesting, too, because he starts to see weird things. George C. Scott does. He starts seeing visions. He sees a headless Jesus, which predicts the murder that the demon does when he possesses. Like, they hops around the different people. Beheading, too. This is another one, too, that you'll notice. What is the meaning of beheading? Beheading comes up in a lot of movies, a lot of films that have symbolic kind of ritual elements like this. Now, there are different, spiritist, animist, superstitious traditions about the beheading, but if you just think about it on the most basic symbolic level, the beheading is, this is what rules the body, right? Like the head rules the body. If you think about Plato, society is a body. The head represents in the Republic the leaders, the philosopher king. The body, which is controlled by the heart, right? The head's controlled by the mind. It controls the whole thing. Heart, right? It's the energy engine of the body. And it corresponds to the guardian level of the three-tiered Platonic society. And then you have the base desires, which is the body. That's the masses. And so, yes, that's Plato's three-tiered republic is a pyramid. Philosopher king, guardian, warrior class, they correspond to the noble virtues. Philosopher king, he corresponds at the top of the pyramid to the most enlightened and illumined, right, highest level of reason. He's closer to the forms in Platonism. And then at the bottom are the masses, and they're controlled by their base desires, and they're stupid. So that three-tiered system is relevant because if you cut the head off, then the whole thing dies, right? And so the image of cutting the head off of Jesus is something like the removal of the leadership of the church, destroying the church, just getting rid of the Pope. And I'm not saying the Pope actually is the head of the church, but from the vantage point of people who believe like Roman Catholicism, right, they would interpret it like, oh, the head's being cut off. That's the removal of the Pope, the head. Also in the history of revolutionary thought, the removal of the head is the removal of the monarch, because the monarch is the head of the kingdom. Legion. So again, this comes up as legion. This is, if you're not familiar, in the Gospels, right? When Jesus cast the demon into the swine, they say, "We are legion, we are many." So they're like a Borg hive mind, right? The demons have this tendency to have this inverted, weird hive mind where they're all, it's like a H.R. Giger painting where they're all linked in the Borg hive mind, and I think that's why they're trying to build the hive mind, the world brain, the global brain. It is demonic. And then it possesses the priest, who at some point, I guess, became a Satanist. And the priest has this long argument, confrontation with Kinderman, the Jewish police detective. And the idea in the movie is that perhaps multiple murderers are actually behind the Zodiac. Isn't that interesting? Because that's actually some people's theses about the Zodiac, is that it was a bunch of different killers all under the direction of either a hit squad or something like this, or perhaps even something occultic, some people theorize. Or it was just a bunch of murders that were just arbitrarily connected and concocted as a media stunt. It could be any of those. I don't really have any set, definite opinion on the Zodiac. But it's just interesting that it's being used in the movie, and the movie presents it as not one Zodiac killer. Very interesting. So then we start seeing the ritual, the occult ritual stuff. Autism comes back up again. It's a Wonderful Life is written in blood. And this is reminiscent of the Manson type stuff. So they're taking iconic Americana, old, 50s pseudo sort of evangelical Christian, It's a Wonderful Life type stuff, transforming it into the dark Manson-esque blood on the wall stuff written by the demon. So this is multiple serial killers in one. I forgot to mention. It's also the Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez, who, by the way, had Phoenix program type ties. Something about K names, little Kevin. K. Yes, because 11. K is the 11th letter. So 11s and Ks keep coming up. The reason that it's K11 in Exorcist 3, do you remember why? I remember why now. It's because that's the cell that the possessed priest is in, that the Gemini demon is possessing. He's in cell 11, Legion. 11, interesting. Way before events that later have 11 as a significant number. Well, it's 11, it's the two pillars, right, the left and the right, Jachin and Boaz. So the movie, actually, yes, the movie does do symbolism, synchromysticism, mystical toponymy, which is king kill ritual stuff, right? Oh yeah, there's a pretty gruesome scene of a boy who underwent a ritual killing. The doctor in the mental institute is also possessed, and he's into ritual magic. He's a demon doctor into ritual magic. Again, all like a lot of these MKULTRA CIA doctors were into. So here you go, bro. The movies are telling you what's really going on. So, by the way, yeah, so what's the assessment that we're getting here through the Exorcism series? Totally illuminate, confirm. That's the overall assessment here. And I didn't expect that. And now I expected, there's going to be, some demon elements or something, and there'll be like, weird Catholic stuff or something. Because I haven't seen The Exorcist since I was 18. Like, I watched it at 18. Haven't thought much about it since then. And then now watching it, and I'm like, damn, dog, this is crazy.